We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Vav Amid Beis in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 106b. On the previous Amid, the Gemara asked, where's the source for the warning for slaughtering kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash? And the Gemara brought the pasuk of V'lo Yizbechu Od. And the Gemara now is in the middle of bringing a brisa in which V'lo Yizbechu Od is used for something else, is used to say that when one slaughters outside of the Beis HaMikdash, let's say we're talking about a karban which was consecrated during the time when bamos, when private altars actually were permitted, as the brisa now continues and says, up until this point, we're only talking about when the kachim was consecrated at a time when the bamos were prohibited. Sharei on shan amor, there the punishment is stated. V'al pesach ol moed, it says v'al pesach ol moed. Rashi explains Sharei on shan amor kolomar. What it means to say is demistama behu mishtoi kra les, or it makes sense to say the pasuk is talking about that situation where one consecrated kachim, again talking about a situation of slaughtering outside of the Beis HaMikdash during a time he consecrated during the time of Isser Bamos. V'harei on shan amor kan, and the punishment is written over here. And Azhara, we also have a warning. As it's written, Hishamer lecha pentala olosecha, be careful not to offer up your karbonolos. And so again, all of these psukim are talking about offering up these karbonos which were consecrated during the time of Isser Bamos. Mikan va'elech, but from here forward in the psukim, bezvachim she'ekdeshan b'shas heter habamos, we're talking about where the animals, they were consecrated to be kachim during the time when bamos actually were permitted, but then v'hikrivan, but then they were offered b'shas Isser habamos, they were offered already at the time when bamos were no longer permitted. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Laman asher yaviu b'nei Yisrael zivcheim asher him zovchim, Zvachim shehitarti lecha kvar. It means those karbanos which were permitted earlier, because at the time it was consecrated, there was a heter bamos. That's what we're talking about. Al panei hasada, the pasuk goes on to say, Al panei hasada, lomar lach, to say to you, hazoveach b'shas Isser habamos, if somebody slaughters at the time that bamos are prohibited, again, even if it was consecrated earlier, mala olav hakasav kilu hikriv al panei hasada, the pasuk considers it as if he offered it in the field, vehavium la Hashem, and bring them to Hashem, zu mitzvah saseh, that's a positive commandment. And lo saseh minayin, from where do we know the lo saseh? Talmud lomar v'lo yizbechu od, that's from v'lo yizbechu od. And so you see v'lo yizbechu od is needed for the lo saseh in this particular scenario. And yochol yehei onish kares, the brisa goes on to say, one might think there's a punishment of kares in this case, where the animal was consecrated during the time where the bamos were permitted, but that's not true. Talmud lomar, chukas olam tiyazos lehem ledorosam, it says zos lehem ledorosam, means zos lehem, this punishment applies to them. There's a violation of an aseh and a lo saseh. However, v'lo acheres lehem, there's no other punishment, there is no kares. And Rashi explains, Mikan vo'elach shenemar leman asher yaviu, again, as the pasuk goes on, it's talking about where they were consecrated during the time of the heter habamos, before the Mishkan. D'midichsev asher heim zovchim, because from the phrase in the pasuk where it's written asher heim zovchim, mashma shayu omdim lishachit bebama, that implies that it was already ready to be slaughtered at the bama, at the private altar. Umikan vo'elach ve'avium la'Hashem, and then from there forward, ve'avium la'Hashem, again, the bamas are not allowed. Kizoveach basada, if one would be mala, if one would offer it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's kizoveach basada, meaning shalol l'shem shamayim. That would be considered shalol l'shem shamayim, not for the sake of heaven. And mitzvahs lo saseh, how do we know a lo saseh? B'hanach dukdashu b'shas heter minayin. If they were consecrated at the time of heter bamas, how do we know there's a lo saseh? Talmud lomar v'lo yizbechu od. That's what the pasuk says that's what the pasuk means when it says v'lo yizbechu od. Mashma me'achshav asurin. It's understood to be saying that from now it's asur. V'ad achshav mutar, but until now is mutar. Again, talking about these animals that were consecrated at the time of heter bamos, zos lehem, and in this situation, only this punishment, onesh aseh v'lo saseh, only the punishment of violating an aseh and a lo saseh, v'lo acheres lehem, but not another punishment of kares. Kares does not apply in this situation. And the Gemara continues and answers, Elo Amar, and the Bach over here has the girsa of Abaya, Elo Amar Abaya, rather Abaya says, Kal v'chomer, the way we know that there's a warning for slaughtering kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash, again talking about a situation where this all happened b'shas Isser habamos, how do we know that? We make the following Kal v'chomer. Uma b'mokum shalo anash, if in a situation where there's no punishment, meaning when it was consecrated b'shas heter habamos, as we said, there's no kares, his here, there we have a warning, as we just said, so mokum sha'anash, in a place where there is a punishment of kares. Let's say everything happened at the time of the Isser habamos, eino din shehizir, isn't it logical to say that there's a warning, and that is the source for the warning of slaughtering kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash? Rashi explains, Mokom shelo anash, in a place where there's no punishment, kagon bekachim she'ekdeshon b'shas heter, again, like by kachim, which were consecrated by the time of heter abamos. His here, there's a warning, kedamar, kind of like we just said here. So in a place, sha'anash, where there is a punishment, keshehuktashu b'shas isra, meaning when they were consecrated in the time of isra abamos, eino din shehizir, isn't logical to say through a kal v'chomer that there's a warning, l'kaman parach, and as the Gemara goes on, it will ask, v'chi mazhir and minadin, are we allowed to issue a warning based on a kal v'chomer? And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, the Shinui Nuschos has the Girsa of Abaya. Ravina said to Abaya, Im Kain, if so, if we're able to make this Kal V'chomer, that if in a situation where there's no punishment of Kares, there's a warning, so then for sure in a situation where there is a punishment of Kares, for sure there should be a warning. If you can make that Kal V'chomer to derive an Azhara, to derive a warning. So Lo Yayomer Lav B'chelev, the Torah does not need to say a Lav, a negative commandment, a warning by the prohibition of eating Chelev. One is not allowed to eat the Chelev of a behema, of a domesticated animal, and the punishment over there is kares, so you don't need to have a lav over there, because v'teisi kal v'chomer min nevela, we should learn it out from a kal v'chomer from nevela. As follows, ma nevela, just like by eating nevela, shelo anash, there's no punishment of kares there, and hizir, there's a warning. So chaylev shel anash, by chaylev, where there is a punishment of kares, eino din, shehizir, isn't it logical to say there's a warning? Why do we need a lav by chaylev? Also, l'kami de Ravi came before Rava, Amar Lei said to him, min nevela nami lo asi, you can learn from nevela. The ikal mifrach, because you can refute that kal v'chomer. Ma'al nevela shekain metame, because by nevela, a nevela also causes tumah, and therefore, since it imparts tumah, you can't learn from nevela to the case of chaylev where there's no tumah. And the Gemara continues and asks, if we can't learn out from nevela because it imparts tumah, so mishrotzim tamein, why not learn out chaylev, learn out a lav by chaylev from shrotzim tamein, which are creeping animals that are tamei? And the Gemara again says, ma'al shrotzim tamein shemetamin b'mashu, shrotzim tamein are different. Again, they impart tumah, and so therefore, again, you're not going to be able to learn to chaylev, which does not impart tumah. Rashi explains Mishratzim. V'im tomar teisi azhara b'chelev b'kal v'chomer Mishratzim. We should learn a warning by chelev from a kal v'chomer from shratzim tameim, from the creeping animals that are tamei. Could go in shmona shratzim, for example, the 8 shratzim which are tamei. And the Gemara then said, no, again, the shratzim tameim are tamei b'mashu, with even the smallest amount. Tumasan b'chadosha, their amount is actually a tumah, is b'chadosha, is the size of a lentil. Avol chelev b'kazayis, but chelev, the amount is a kazayis. This is difficult. The Shinui Nuschos deals with this because chelev doesn't impart any tumah. What does it mean, chelev b'kazayis? But again, the basic point is the same. The point is that shratzim tameim are metame, chelev is not metame, therefore you cannot learn from shratzim tameim. And the Gemara continues, mishratzim tahorim, why not learn from shratzim tahorim? But ma'al shratzim tahorim, by the creeping animals that are tahor, she'isurin b'mashu, there the isser to consume them is even the smallest amount. That's different than chelev, which is a kazayis, and so therefore again you can't learn from shratzim tahorim, from those shratzim that do not impart tumah. Rashi explains, mishratzim tahorim she'ein metamin, there are shratzim that are not metamin. It could go in svardeya or nemola, for example, that's svardeya and the nemola. Shekein asurin b'mashu, but they're also in any amount. La'achila b'chadosha, Rashi says you can't eat them, and the size is actually a kadosha, the size of a lentil. Kedetanya b'me'ila b'gemara b'perakot shemizbeach v'lo seshaksu es nafshosechem b'behemu v'of. Pasach ha'kosa b'achila b'sayim b'tumah lomar loch keshir tumasan shal shratzim tameim, the same shear of tumah of the impure shratzim, shir achilasan shall kol hashratzim. That's the shear of that it's usher to eat all shratzim. To akulu kayil hu ba'ikra. They're all included in this pasuk. Uvechol asher tirmos ha'adama. That pasuk of uvechol asher tirmos ha'adama. V'shir tu masa nafkalan ba'kol chayavim shekein chomet tchilas briyasu b'chadasha. In terms of what is the shear, the measurement for tumah, that's learned out in Meseches chagiga. And so in any case, the point over here is you can't learn out from shratzim tahorim. The Gemara continues and asks, May orla, what about from orla? That's fruit from trees that are within the first 3 years. V'kilei hakerem, or let's say you have kilei hakerem, that's mixtures from the vineyard. So we should learn out from there. Again, those are situations where you don't have the punishment, but you have the warning. But marla orla v'kilei hakerem shekein asurin b'hano, you can't learn from there, because both orla and kilayim, they're prohibited to get any benefit, so you can't learn chayla from there. The Gemara says, mishvias, why not learn from shvias, produce of the Shemitah year? The Gemara says, no, ma'ala shvias shekein tofeses domea. Shvias also is unique. If one purchases the produce of the Shemitah year, the money actually gets that kedusha. And the Gemara says, mitruma, why not learn from truma? And the Gemara says to that, shekein lo huter michlala truma. Truma, you don't have any case where it's permitted. It is a general prohibition. Whereas, as we mentioned by chaylev, the prohibition by chaylev is specifically by domesticated animals, by behema. It doesn't apply by chaya. That's called huter michlala. Therefore, you can't learn from truma. The Gemara says michulu nami, but from all of them we can really make that argument. Shekein lo huter michlala. None of these are huter michlala, and they don't have any situations where they're permitted, they're essentially forbidden across the board. And again, that is not true by chaylev. Chaylev applies by behema, and it does not apply by chaya. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Rava says, Ikashali hakashali, if anything is difficult to me, the following is a difficulty to me. Haditanan, that which we learned in a Mishnah in Meseches Krisos, Pesach umila mitzvahs aseh. Pesach and Mila, those are mitzvahs aseh, which there is kares, there's no chatos over there, but there is kares, and so in that situation, teisi bekal v'chomer, we should learn that from a kal v'chomer, we should learn out a los aseh, and there really should be a chatos over there if it's done by mistake. The following kal v'chomer, mimoser, we should learn it out from a case of moser, that's if somebody leaves over the Korban Pesach, it says you can't leave it over until the morning, and so over there, ma moser shelo onash, in a situation where you leave it over, there is no punishment, but hizir, there's a warning. So Pesach umila, when it comes to Pesach and Mila, Sha'anash, where there is a punishment, Eino din shehizir, isn't it logical to say that there should be a warning? And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi, Ravashi says, Amrisa l'shmaita kamid Rav Kahana, I said over this teaching in front of Rav Kahana, V'amar lin, he said to me, Mimoser lo asi, you can't learn it out from one who leaves it over, the ikol mifrach, because that can be refuted as follows, Malam moser shekena ein lo takana, when it comes to moser, there is no takana, there is no way of solving the fact that there was a violation, Tomer v'Pesach, whereas by Korban Pesach, yesh lo takana, there is a takana, because there's something called Pesach Sheni, one can bring the Korban Pesach the next month, and so therefore, you will not be able to learn out Pesach from the case of Mosir. And the Gemara asks now a general question, V'chim mazhirin min hadin, is it possible to issue a warning based on a kal v'chomer? The entire answer we just gave above is based on the idea that the azhara is coming from a kal v'chomer. Afilu l'man damar onshin min hadin, even according to the one who says a punishment can be based on a kal v'chomer, ein mazhirin min hadin, one cannot issue a warning based on a kal v'chomer, and so therefore, how can we say again, back to the original question, what is the source for the warning of shchutei chutz, of slaughtering outside of the Beis HaMikdash? And the Gemara continues and answers, Ella rather kid Rabbi Yochanan. The actual source is like Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar who says, Asya hava hava, we make a gzera shava, we learn Shchita uses the term hava, and by hala, by offering up outside the Beis HaMikdash, it uses the term hava, and we use that gzera shava. Malahalan lo anash alim kain hizr, just like over there, there's only a punishment with a warning, afkan lo anash elim kain hizr. So to over here, there's only a punishment with a warning. And Rashi explains, Zafilu l'man damar, even according to the one who says, B'Meseches Makos and Meseches Makos onshin midin kal v'chomer, that we can punish from a kal v'chomer, modo de'ein mazhirin min hadin, he admits that there's no warning through a kal v'chomer, the Tanya b'perakama de Makos, as we learned in the first parak of Makos, and Rashi goes on to bring the source from Makos, and then the Gemara said, Asya hava hava, we have a gzera shava hava hava, shchita mehala, we learn out slaughtering outside the Beis HaMikdash from offering up outside the Beis HaMikdash, ksib b'shchita lo havio, it says by shchita lo havio, Uchsib b'hala lo yevienu, by hala it says lo yevienu, Gzera Shava, and when it comes to a Gzera Shava, that's not a Kal V'chomer. A Gzera Shava is different. Ho'alu mufnahi, since these are free words that we can make this Gzera Shava, Lakach, it's free for this purpose of the Gzera Shava. Harei Kamisha Mefarish, but as if it's explicit. Ve'ein ze min hadin ke Kal V'chomer she'adam don me'atzmo. This is not the same as a Kal V'chomer that a person makes on his own. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph.